Well, my wife's lawyer demanded my grandfather's 1987 trust documents. Sure, they'd prove I was hiding millions. I smiled and said they're public record. 48 hours later, he called at 2 a.m., voice shaking. What he found didn't just destroy her case. It exposed a 35-year lie about my son. My name is Dane Whitfield. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, I've worked with my hands, building boats, repairing hulls, turning raw fiberglass and marine-grade aluminum into vessels that cut through water like they were born to it. My grandfather, Gerald R. Whitfield, founded Whitfield Marine Construction back in 1964 in Beaufort, South Carolina. Started with a single dock and a dream. By the time he handed me the keys in '89, we had 3 facilities and a reputation for building yachts that made grown men weep. I married Adelaide Sinclair in 1992. She was 24, fresh out of college with a degree in marketing and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. I was 29 and stupid enough to think that chemistry and ambition were the same thing as character. We had 3 kids. Brandon came first in '90, 2 years before the wedding. Yeah, that kind of start. Chloe followed in '93, and Austin in '97. For years, everything looked perfect from the outside. Adelaide ran the business development side of Whitfield Marine while I handled operations. She brought in clients. I delivered the boats. We attended charity galas, hosted 4th of July barbecues at our waterfront home, smiled for Christmas cards. The whole American dream package. But underneath, something was rotting. I just didn't want to smell it yet. The first crack in the facade came 3 years ago when I noticed discrepancies in our business accounts. Small amounts at first. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. When I asked Adelaide about it, she brushed it off as vendor payments or marketing expenses. I believed her because I wanted to. Because questioning your wife of decades feels like admitting you've been a fool. Then came the phone call that changed everything. October 2023. IRS office in Charleston. They wanted to discuss the Gerald R. Whitfield Family Trust, established in 1987. The trust my grandfather had set up to protect the business and properties after he survived his first heart attack. I hadn't thought about that trust in years. Honestly, I'd almost forgotten it existed. My grandfather died in 2003, and life moved on. The business kept running. Bills got paid. Adelaide handled most of the financial paperwork while I focused on keeping our crew employed and our boats seaworthy. That phone call was Adelaide's lawyer. He was very polite, very professional. He informed me that Adelaide was filing for divorce and requesting a full forensic audit of all family assets, including the 1987 trust documents. I remember standing in my workshop when I got that call, holding a pneumatic sander in one hand and my phone in the other. The smell of teak dust and marine varnish filled the air. Outside, 2 of my guys were pressure washing a 45-foot sportfisher we just pulled from the water. And all I could think was, she's really doing this. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I was in the main workshop, supervising the installation of twin Caterpillar engines into a 60-footer we were building for a client in Miami. The sound of hydraulic lifts and power tools filled the air, but everything went quiet in my head the moment I saw that manila envelope. I signed for it without a word, waited until the guy left, then walked to my office and locked the door behind me. The office was small, cluttered with blueprints and marine supply catalogs, but it had a window overlooking the water. I could see 2 of our boats moored to the dock, their hulls gleaming in the morning sun. The petition was 23 pages long. Most of it was standard divorce language, irreconcilable differences, and equitable distribution. But page 17 made my blood run cold. It listed the Gerald R. Whitfield Family Trust as a marital asset subject to division. It claimed that I had maintained exclusive control over trust assets throughout our marriage, denying Adelaide her rightful share of family wealth. That was a lie, a calculated, deliberate lie. I'd never controlled the trust in the way she was claiming. Yes, I was listed as trustee, but that was administrative. The trust had strict guidelines about distributions, about succession, about who could access what and when. My grandfather had designed it that way specifically to protect the business from exactly this kind of attack. I picked up my phone and called the one person who would understand what I was looking at. Douglas Merrick. He'd been my grandfather's estate attorney back in the '80s, had helped structure the original trust documents. He was 78 now, semi-retired, but still sharp as a blade. Douglas answered on the third ring. Dane Whitfield. It's been what, 5 years? I need your help, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Adelaide's filing for divorce, and she's coming after the trust. There was a long pause. Then Douglas said, forward me the papers. I'll review them and call you back within 2 hours. He called back in 90 minutes. Dane, this is bad. Her attorney is competent, but he's operating on false information. The petition claims you've been the primary beneficiary of trust distributions since 1987. That's not accurate, is it? No, I said. I've taken a trustee's administrative fee, but that's it. The business revenue goes back into operations and employee salaries. I draw a salary as general manager, but that's separate from the trust itself. Douglas made it sound like he was writing notes. Does Adelaide know the actual structure of the trust? I thought about that. Really thought about it. I explained it to her years ago, but I don't think she ever understood. Or maybe she didn't want to understand. She always talked about our family business like it was something we owned outright. The trust documents are going to tell a very different story, Douglas said. Question is, does she know that? Or is her attorney operating blind? I don't know, I admitted. Then we're going to find out, Douglas replied. I'm filing a response on your behalf. We'll request that all trust documents be entered into the court record as part of discovery. If she wants to make the trust a central issue, we'll give her exactly what she asked for. Every page, every clause, every signature from 1987 forward. Something in his tone made me pause. Douglas, what am I missing here? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Dane, when was the last time you actually reviewed the original trust documents? Not the summaries or the annual reports. The originals. I don't know. Maybe 15 years ago. Go find them, Douglas said. Read them carefully, especially Section 4, subsection C. Then call me back. He hung up before I could ask what he meant. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. Outside, I could hear my crew shouting instructions to each other, the whine of a circular saw, the metallic clang of someone dropping a wrench. Normal sounds. Normal day. Except nothing was normal anymore. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and headed for my father's house. Because that's where the original trust documents were stored. In a fireproof safe in his den, exactly where my grandfather had left them 20 years ago. My father's house sat on 2 acres overlooking Brickyard Creek, a modest ranch he'd bought after Mom passed in 2011. He was 79 now, spent most days fishing and watching westerns. When I pulled into his driveway that afternoon, he was on the porch with sweet tea, like he'd been expecting me. She finally did it, he said as I climbed the steps. Not a question. How'd you know? Dad gestured to the chair beside him. Adelaide's been asking about the trust for 2 years. Stopped by last Christmas. Wanted to know where the original documents were kept. I told her they were in proper storage and changed the subject. Should have known she was planning something. I sat down, suddenly exhausted. Douglas told me to read Section 4, subsection C. What's in it? He took a long drink, then set the glass down carefully. Your grandfather was suspicious. Lived through the Depression, saw what desperation did to families. When he set up that trust in 87, he put in protection clauses most people never use. What kind of protections? The kind that disqualify anyone who tries to claim ownership through marriage or litigation, Dad said. Spendthrift provision with a challenge penalty. If someone married into the family tries to break the trust or claim it as marital property, they automatically forfeit any future distributions. Forever. The words hit like cold water. Adelaide doesn't know. I'd bet my savings she doesn't. Because if she did, she never would have filed. The moment her lawyer claimed that trust as marital property in divorce papers, she triggered the penalty. She locked herself out of ever receiving a dime from Whitfield Family Holdings. I leaned back, processing. Her attorney doesn't know either. Probably not. Most lawyers don't read old trust documents unless they have to. They rely on client information and make assumptions. We sat quiet for a while. A blue heron landed in the creek below, stalking through shallows. The sun dropped toward the horizon, painting everything gold. I need to see those documents, I said. Dad stood with a grunt. Follow me. The safe was in his bedroom closet, behind hanging shirts. Old combination lock. Dad spun the dial, and a heavy door swung open. Inside were stacks of labeled folders, some photos, and a small wooden box from my grandfather's desk. Dad pulled out a thick folder bound with rubber bands. Gerald R. Whitfield Family Trust, April 1987. Every amendment, every filing. Take these to Douglas. Let him do what needs doing. I took the folder, felt its weight. For decades of family history, all the legal architecture my grandfather built to protect what he'd created. Adelaide, in her arrogance, had walked face first into a trap she didn't know existed. Dad, when this comes out, it's going to get ugly. He nodded slowly. Son, it was already ugly. You're just finally seeing it. Your grandfather knew people show their true nature when money's on the table. That's why he built these protections. He was looking out for you from the grave. I left as the sun touched water, the folder secure in my truck. Tomorrow I'd take it to Douglas. Then we'd see how badly Adelaide had miscalculated. The deposition was scheduled for a gray Tuesday in February at Adelaide's attorney's office in Charleston. Modern glass tower downtown, all reflective surfaces and expensive views. I showed up in khakis and a polo, same thing I'd wear to the workshop. Douglas arrived in his rumpled suit, carrying a leather briefcase probably worth more than my truck. Adelaide's lawyer was Garrett Hutchins, early 40s, perfect teeth, handshake that tried too hard. He had an associate taking notes on a laptop. Adelaide sat at the table's end in a navy dress, wouldn't look at me directly, just stared at her phone or whispered to Hutchins. Hutchins started with standard questions. Name, address, employment. Then he moved to the trust. Mr. Whitfield, you're listed as trustee of the Gerald R. Whitfield Family Trust, correct? That's correct. Douglas had coached me. Short answers. Don't volunteer. Let them dig their own hole. And you've served in that capacity since when? I was named trustee in 1989 after I turned 30. Hutchins made notes. During your marriage to Adelaide, have you received distributions from this trust? Trustee administrative fees, which are standard. The trust generates revenue through Whitfield Marine, but those funds are reinvested into operations. So you're saying you haven't personally benefited from trust assets? His tone suggested disbelief. I've benefited as an employee of the business the trust owns. I draw a salary. That's different from trust distributions. Hutchins leaned forward. Mr. Whitfield, we believe there are assets that haven't been properly disclosed. We're requesting full production of all trust documents from 1987 to present. Formation papers, amendments, distribution records, bank statements, everything. I glanced at Douglas. He gave a slight nod. They're public record, I said calmly. The trust was filed with the county. You can request certified copies from the clerk's office anytime. The room went dead silent. Adelaide's head snapped up. For 1 second, I saw something in her eyes. Not quite panic, but close. Uncertainty, like she just realized she might have missed something crucial. Hutchins recovered quickly. We'll be filing that request today. In the meantime, I want to make clear that we believe my client is entitled to 50% of all marital assets, including her share of the trust principal. Douglas spoke for the first time. Mr. Hutchins, I'd encourage you to review those documents very carefully before you commit to that position in writing, particularly Section 4, subsection C. And what's in Section 4, subsection C? Hutchins asked, confidence wavering slightly. Douglas smiled. Not friendly. You'll find out soon enough. Shall we continue? Or do you need a recess to consider your strategy? Hutchins looked at Adelaide. She was staring at me now, really staring, trying to read my expression. I kept my face neutral, hands folded on the table. We'll continue, Hutchins said, but sounded less certain than 5 minutes ago. The deposition went another 2 hours, but the damage was done. Hutchins filed his request for documents before we left the building. 2 days later, Douglas called. The documents are ready for pickup. Hutchins requested expedited processing and paid extra. Has he reviewed them? According to the clerk, he picked them up this morning. 43 pages. Every clause, every signature, every amendment from 87 forward. How long until he calls? Douglas chuckled. I give it 24 hours. Maybe less if he actually reads what he's got. It took 48 hours. The call came at 2 in the morning. My phone lit up on the nightstand. Garrett Hutchins' office number glowing in the darkness. I let it ring twice before answering. Mr. Whitfield, this is Garrett Hutchins. I apologize for the late hour, but we need to talk immediately. I sat up, turned on the lamp. I'm listening. There was a long pause. Paper rustling, someone pacing. When Hutchins spoke again, his voice had lost all courtroom confidence. It sounded thin, strained, like a man standing on a trapdoor. The trust documents. Mr. Whitfield, when we discussed the trust at deposition, your wife indicated she'd been promised certain distributions, that there was an understanding about her inheritance rights. And the documents tell a very different story. Section 4, subsection C. The challenge penalty provision. He paused. Did Adelaide know about this clause? I explained the trust structure to her multiple times over the years. Hutchins exhaled slowly. This provision states that any person who challenges the trust or attempts to claim assets through litigation automatically forfeits all future rights to distributions. It's ironclad. By filing this divorce petition with claims on the trust, my client triggered this penalty. She has no legal standing to receive any trust benefits. Ever. I let the silence stretch. Mr. Hutchins, I've been trustee for 34 years. I know every clause my grandfather built into it. Yes, I knew. Jesus Christ. The words came as a whisper. She told me you were hiding assets, that you'd manipulated the trust to exclude her. She swore she had evidence. Did she show you this evidence? No. She said it was in her personal files, that she'd produce it during discovery. His voice broke slightly. I filed motions based on false information. If the judge discovers my client lied to me, this could trigger sanctions against both of us. Then I'd suggest you have an honest conversation with your client about the difference between what she wanted to be true and what actually is. Hutchins was quiet. There's something else. The trust lists a secondary beneficiary. Trevor Whitfield, born 1990. Your son. But there's a notation here, a DNA paternity confirmation dated May 1990. Why would your grandfather require DNA confirmation? My stomach dropped. Because my grandfather was a careful man. He wanted to ensure bloodline before including anyone in trust structure. And the results? I took a breath. The results showed Trevor is not biologically mine. Adelaide had an affair with someone from her office in 1989. She was pregnant when we got married. I found out 3 months after the wedding. My grandfather knew. He still added Trevor as a kindness to me, but he wanted documentation on record. Hutchins said nothing for several seconds. Does Adelaide know you have this information? She knows I found out about the affair. Whether she knows the DNA test was documented in the trust files, I doubt it. Mr. Whitfield, if this becomes part of the court record, the impact on your family could be devastating, which is why I've kept it private for 35 years. But if Adelaide wants to make this trust a public battleground, then everything in those files becomes fair game, including the truth about Trevor's paternity. I could hear Hutchins breathing. I need to speak with my client. Tonight. This case needs to be withdrawn immediately. That's your decision. But understand, my grandfather built protections for exactly this scenario. Adelaide triggered every protection when she filed. There's no walking it back. The penalty is already in effect, even if she withdraws the claims. Section 4 is clear. The penalty triggers upon filing, not resolution. Once you claim that trust is marital property, the damage was done. Adelaide is permanently disqualified. That's the price of her miscalculation. Hutchins let out a long breath. I'll contact you tomorrow through proper channels. Mr. Hutchins, one more thing. When you speak to Adelaide, ask her about the charitable foundation she claims to run, the Sinclair Women's Initiative. Ask her where the funding came from. You might find that interesting. What do you mean? Just ask her. Then check the state nonprofit registry. I hung up before he could respond. The room was quiet except for whine through the trees outside. I sat there thinking about the phone call that would happen in hours. Hutchins confronting Adelaide. Her realizing everything was crumbling. And Trevor, my son in everything but blood. If this case continued to trial, that truth would come out in public court records. I lay back down, but didn't sleep. Just waited for sunrise. Douglas Mara called at 7 the next morning. Dane, I just got an email from Garrett Hutchins. He's requesting an emergency meeting. Says there are issues with his client's claims that need immediate resolution. 2 o'clock today in my office. What did you tell him? That we're available. But Dane, he also asked about Adelaide's charitable foundation. What's that about? I poured coffee, looked out at the marina. Adelaide's been telling people for 5 years she runs a foundation focused on women's education. The Sinclair Women's Initiative. She's used it to get invitations to galas, to position herself in Charleston's social scene. But when I noticed money disappearing from business accounts 3 years ago, I hired a forensic accountant. He traced about $70,000 to an account Adelaide opened in the foundation's name. Except the Sinclair Women's Initiative doesn't exist as a legal nonprofit, never registered with the state, never filed for tax-exempt status. It's just a name and a bank account she controls. Douglas was quiet. That's fraud. She's been telling people the foundation exists, taking credit for grants other organizations run. A few people have written checks thinking they're donating. Small amounts, 1,000 here, 2,000 there. Adelaide deposited them and used the money for personal expenses. Designer clothes, spa treatments, weekend trips, she told me were foundation business. How much total? About $90,000 over 5 years. Not enough for major fraud charges, but enough to destroy her reputation if it becomes public. Every committee she's on will cut ties the moment they learn the foundation is fake. At 2 o'clock, I walked into Douglas's office. Hutchins was already there with his associate. Adelaide wasn't present. Hutchins looked like he hadn't slept, suit wrinkled, tie loose. "Mr. Whitfield, thank you for meeting. I'll be direct. After reviewing the complete trust documents and speaking with my client this morning, it's clear our petition contains significant factual errors. We're prepared to withdraw all claims related to the trust. We'll file an amended petition that removes any mention of the Gerald R. Whitfield Family Trust." Douglas leaned back. "And the challenge penalty? Your client understands she's already triggered Section 4, subsection C? That withdrawal doesn't reverse the penalty." "Yes, she understands. She's accepted that she has forfeited any future trust benefits." I set my briefcase on the table. "Mr. Hutchins, what did your client tell you about the Sinclair Women's Initiative?" His face went pale. "Mr. Whitfield, that's a separate matter. Is it? If your client has been committing fraud, using fake charitable status to solicit donations, that speaks to credibility. It might be relevant in front of a judge discussing spousal support." The associate spoke up. "We've advised our client about legal implications. She's agreed to make corrections to public statements and return any donations received under false pretenses." "Return them with what money?" I asked. "She spent those donations. I have the bank records." The room went quiet. Hutchins closed his eyes. "What do you want, Mr. Whitfield?" "An honest divorce. Asset division based on what's actually ours. The house, vehicles, retirement accounts. I want Adelaide to stop lying about the business, about her charitable work. And I want this resolved quickly, without dragging our children through a trial where family secrets become public record." Hutchins nodded. "We can work with that. I'll draft a settlement proposal for actual marital assets. No mention of the trust. In exchange, you agree not to pursue charges related to the foundation." "Acceptable." I looked at Douglas. He nodded slightly. "Draft it. We'll review within 48 hours. But make sure your client understands something. This is her one chance to end this quietly. If she changes her mind, if she makes more false claims, then everything comes out. The fake foundation, the DNA test on Trevor, all of it. I've kept those secrets to protect my family, but I won't hesitate to use them if she forces my hand." "Understood," Hutchins said. Later, Douglas walked me to the parking garage. "Are you really willing to expose Trevor's paternity if this goes to trial?" "No," I admitted. "But Adelaide doesn't know that. She's terrified of losing her social standing. That threat is enough. She'll sign whatever settlement Hutchins puts in front of her. And if she doesn't," I climbed into my truck, "then we'll find out how much she's willing to lose. But my money's on her folding. She always does when there's real consequences." 3 days after the emergency meeting, Brandon called me, not as Adelaide's advocate, but as my son. His voice was careful, measured, like he was walking through a minefield. "Dad, can we meet? Just you and me. Not a law office. Somewhere neutral." We met at Waterfront Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the harbor. Brandon was 35 now, wearing a suit that cost more than I made in a week at the marina. But his face looked younger, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "I found out about the DNA test," he started, staring at the water. "Mom told me last night. She was drunk, angry about Hutchins withdrawing from the case. She said you've been holding it over her head for 35 years, using it to control her." "That's not true." "I know." Brandon turned to look at me. "I read the trust documents. The DNA test was done at Grandpa Gerald's request, not yours. You could have walked away when you found out, filed for annulment, left Mom to deal with the consequences. But you didn't. You raised me. You put my name on that marina. You taught me everything about building boats. You're my son, Brandon. That was never a question. But Mom made a weapon. She told me you only stayed because Grandpa forced you to, that you resented me my whole childhood, that every time you looked at me, you saw her betrayal. I felt anger rise in my chest. Brandon, listen to me. I stayed because I wanted to. Because the moment I held you in that hospital, you became mine. Your mother's affair, the circumstances of your birth, none of that mattered. You were my son. You were my son. Brandon's eyes were wet. She's been lying about everything, hasn't she? The trust, the foundation, her whole image. It's all performance. Your mother has always preferred the story she tells over the reality she lives in. That's who she is. I can't represent her anymore. Even if Hutchins hadn't withdrawn, I couldn't do it. She asked me to help her find another attorney who'd be willing to fight dirty, to dig up anything we could use against you. She wanted me to testify that you'd been financially abusive during the marriage. Dad, I can't lie under oath. I won't. I wouldn't ask you to. Brandon wiped his face. Chloe knows too. Mom called her yesterday, tried to get her on her side, told her you were trying to destroy the family, that we needed to unite against you. Chloe hung up on her. And Austin, I haven't told him yet. He's been sober for 2 years now, Dad. This kind of family drama, it could trigger a relapse. I'm trying to figure out how to tell him without making it worse. I put my hand on Brandon's shoulder. Your brother is stronger than you think. He's been through hell and came out the other side. He can handle the truth. The truth that his mother is a liar and a fraud. That she's been using all of us as props in her social climbing schemes. The truth that sometimes people we love make terrible choices. And that we can acknowledge those choices without destroying ourselves in the process. We sat in silence for a while, watching sailboats move across the harbor. The same harbor where I'd taught Brandon to sail when he was 8. The same water that had been part of our family business for 60 years. Dad, what's going to happen with the divorce? Adelaide will find new counsel. They'll file an amended petition without the trust claims. We'll divide actual marital assets. The house, her car, her personal accounts. She'll get what's legally hers. Nothing more, nothing less. And the foundation fraud. If she returns the money to people who donated, if she quietly dismantles the fake charity and stops using it for social status, I won't pursue charges. But if she tries to keep playing that game, I'll turn everything over to the state attorney general. Brandon nodded slowly. She's going to hate you for this. She already hates me. Has for years. I just didn't want to see it. What about us? Me, Chloe, Austin. Does this change how you see us? I turned to face him directly. Brandon, you 3 are the only good things that came from our marriage. You're the reason I stayed as long as I did. You're the reason I built Whitfield Marine into something worth protecting. Nothing your mother does or says will ever change how I feel about you. You're my children, my legacy. That's not negotiable. Brandon broke down then, leaning into me like he was 10 years old again. I held him while he cried, this grown man in an expensive suit, crying for the mother he'd thought he knew and the father who'd been there all along. The settlement conference happened 2 weeks later in a bland conference room in a mediator's office. Adelaide showed up with her new attorney, a woman named Patricia Ryland who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Patricia had a reputation for being aggressive but smart, someone who knew when to fight and when to fold. Adelaide looked different, thinner, her makeup heavier than usual, trying to hide exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. She wouldn't look at me when we entered the room. The mediator, a retired family court judge named Harold Brennan, laid out the ground rules. We're here to reach an equitable settlement of marital assets. The trust has been removed from consideration per amended petition. We're focusing on the marital home, vehicles, retirement accounts, and personal property. Everyone clear. Patricia spoke first. My client believes she's entitled to compensatory spousal support given her contributions to the marriage and the business over 33 years. Douglas responded. Mrs. Whitfield was employed by Whitfield Marine Construction in a marketing capacity. She received a competitive salary for that work. She's also been drawing from a personal account funded by business revenues without Mr. Whitfield's knowledge or consent. Our forensic accountant has documented approximately $90,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. Patricia's face tightened. Those were legitimate business expenses. For a charitable foundation that doesn't legally exist. Douglas slid a folder across the table. State nonprofit registry search. No Sinclair Women's Initiative registered in South Carolina. No federal tax-exempt status. No board of directors. It's a fake charity Mrs. Whitfield used for personal expenses and social positioning. Adelaide's face went pale. Patricia opened the folder, scanned the documents, then closed it slowly. We like a 15-minute recess. In the hallway, Douglas leaned against the wall. She's going to fold. Ryland knows she can't defend the foundation fraud. Best she can do now is negotiate damage control. When we returned, Patricia's entire demeanor had changed. My client is prepared to accept the following terms. She receives the marital home in Charleston, valued at $420,000, with all equity. She keeps her vehicle, a 2022 Lexus RX. She receives half of Mr. Whitfield's 401k, approximately $230,000. In exchange, she withdraws all claims to business assets, agrees to return donations received for the Sinclair Women's Initiative, and signs a non-disparagement agreement regarding Mr. Whitfield and Whitfield Marine Construction. Douglas looked at me. I nodded. We accept those terms with one addition, Douglas said. Mrs. Whitfield agrees to notify all organizations and committees where she claimed affiliation with the Sinclair Women's Initiative that the foundation is being dissolved. She must do this in writing within 30 days. Patricia glanced at Adelaide, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Agreed. The mediator drafted the settlement terms. We signed. 33 years of marriage reduced to 8 pages of legal language and property division. As we were leaving, Adelaide finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard, cold. You destroyed everything I built. No, I said quietly. You destroyed what you built. I just stopped pretending it was real. She turned and walked away, Patricia following. I watched them disappear down the hallway. This woman I'd spent most of my adult life with, now a stranger. Douglas clapped me on the shoulder. It's done. You're free. But freedom felt heavier than I'd expected. Not because I missed Adelaide, but because of what the divorce had revealed about the life I'd been living. The lies I'd accepted, the truth I'd avoided, the years spent maintaining an illusion for the sake of keeping peace. I drove back to Beaufort alone, windows down, the salt air filling the truck. When I got to the marina, Brandon was there waiting, leaning against his car. It's over. It's over. He hugged me. What happens now? I looked at Whitfield Marine Construction, the boats in various stages of completion, the crew cleaning up for the day. 3 generations of work. My grandfather's vision, my father's dedication, my sweat and skill. Protected now, secure, no longer threatened by someone who'd never understood what it meant. Now, I said, we build boats. Same as we always have. Same as we always will. The scandal hit Charleston's social circles 3 weeks after the settlement. Patricia Ryland, acting on court order, filed Adelaide's notification letters with various charitable organizations. The Magnolia Foundation, the Charleston Women's Leadership Coalition, the Coastal Education Fund. All organizations where Adelaide had claimed board positions with the Sinclair Women's Initiative. The responses were swift and brutal. Organizations released statements distancing themselves from Adelaide. 2 demanded repayment of donations within 30 days or threatened legal action. But the real damage came from Carol Hendricks, Adelaide's best friend for 20 years. She gave an interview to the Charleston Post and Courier. The article ran Sunday morning with the headline, "The Foundation That Never Was. How One Woman Built a Reputation on Lies." I was at the marina when Douglas called. Have you seen the paper? Not yet. Should I? Carol Hendricks went on record. She's been documenting Adelaide's lies for 3 years. Recording conversations, saving emails. It's devastating. I bought the paper. The article was 5 pages long, meticulously detailed. Carol described how Adelaide bragged about manipulating people, about using the fake foundation to climb social ladders. There were quotes, dates, specific incidents. The final paragraph hit hardest. When I confronted Adelaide about the foundation's non-existence, she laughed and said, "People believe what they want to believe." I just gave them a story worth believing. But now the truth is out, and Adelaide Whitfield's carefully constructed image has collapsed. Brandon called an hour later. "Did you know Carol was going to do this?" No, but I'm not surprised. Carol's husband worked for Whitfield Marine 15 years ago. Adelaide got him fired by making false harassment accusations. Ruined his career. Carol's been waiting for payback. Mom's phone is off. Nobody knows where she is. 2 days later, Adelaide had left Charleston entirely, moved to her sister's place in Asheville, North Carolina. She'd resigned from all remaining positions, deleted her social media, and effectively disappeared. Chloe came by the marina. "Dad, I want to help Mom pack." She wouldn't talk to me. Just kept saying everyone betrayed her. She doesn't see it. She still doesn't understand she did this to herself. Some people never do, sweetheart. They live in a world where they're always the victim. Your mother built her identity on what other people thought of her. When that crumbled, she had nothing left. Austin stopped by later. "Dad, I need to tell you something. 3 years ago, when I was still using, Mom found my stash. Instead of getting me help, she used it as leverage. Told me if I supported her in arguments with you, she'd keep it secret. She blackmailed her own son to maintain her lies." The words hit like a punch. "Austin, I'm sorry. You couldn't have known." But knowing she cared more about winning arguments than my sobriety, that's what made me finally get clean. I realized if I stayed under her manipulation, I'd die. So I got out. Got help. In a weird way, her betrayal saved my life. I pulled my youngest son into a hug. "You saved your own life. You did the hard work." That night, I sat in my office looking at photos on the wall. 3 generations of Whitfield boat builders. My grandfather with his first vessel in 1964. My father launching a 40-footer in 1978. Me with Brandon, teaching him blueprints when he was 12. The trust my grandfather built had done exactly what he'd intended. It had protected the business, exposed those who tried to take what they hadn't earned. Adelaide had gambled everything on a lie and lost. Not because I destroyed her, but because truth rises to the surface. Douglas had been right. Some inheritances aren't about money. They're about character, about understanding that some things are bigger than your wants. My grandfather knew that. My father knew that. And now my children knew it too. 8 months later, I stood on the dock watching Brandon guide a brand new 52-foot sport fisher into the water. Custom build for a client in Fort Lauderdale. Every detail perfect. The hull gleamed in afternoon sun. "She's gorgeous," the client said. "Your grandfather would be proud." He would be. I agreed. Brandon joined us, hands covered in marine grease, shirt stained with fiberglass resin. He looked genuinely happy. "Dad, I've been thinking about the trust, about the business. I want to learn the trustee responsibilities. So when the time comes, I'm ready. We'll start next week. I'll show you everything." Chloe had opened a small art gallery in downtown Beaufort, featuring local maritime artists. She'd used her share of Adelaide's settlement to fund it. She stopped by twice a week, bringing coffee and updates. She'd also started dating a Coast Guard officer, a good man who treated her with respect. Austin was thriving in his welding career, 18 months sober and counting. He'd started teaching welding classes at the community college. He told me last week that every time he taught, he thought about the patience I'd shown him. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Adelaide never returned to Charleston. According to Brandon, she was working as an administrative assistant at a medical office in Asheville. Living quietly, no performance. Just existing. I'd heard she told people the divorce was mutual, that we'd grown apart. Still controlling the narrative, still unable to face truth. But it didn't matter anymore. She was gone from my life. The trust remained intact, stronger than ever. Douglas helped me update succession documents. Brandon would take over as trustee when I turned 75. Chloe and Austin would serve as advisory board members. I'd also established a scholarship fund through Whitfield Marine for young people interested in maritime trades. $5,000 annually for vocational training. About passing on knowledge, teaching the next generation that skill and craftsmanship matter more than status. That evening, all 3 children came for dinner. We sat on my back deck overlooking Brickyard Creek, grilling steaks, talking about boats and art and welding and life. No drama, no lies, just family. "Dad," Chloe said as the sun set, "I want to thank you for fighting for truth, for not letting Mom destroy what Grandpa built, for showing us that integrity matters more than keeping peace. You don't have to thank me for that." "Yes, we do," Brandon added. "You could have settled quietly, avoided conflict, but you stood your ground. You showed us that sometimes the right thing is the hard thing. Austin raised his beer. To Dad, the toughest man I know, and to Grandpa Gerald, who built something worth fighting for. We clinked bottles as last light faded. 3 generations of Whitfield legacy, secured not by money, but by choosing truth over convenience, character over comfort. My grandfather had established the trust in 1987 to protect what he'd built. But the real protection wasn't in legal documents. It was in values he passed down, understanding that some things are worth defending. Adelaide had tried to take what wasn't hers, and lost everything she actually had. Her reputation, her marriage, her relationship with her children, her place in the community. All gone because she'd chosen greed over truth. But I'd gained something more valuable. My children's respect, their trust, their understanding of what really matters. As we sat in gathering darkness, I thought about my grandfather's words from 40 years ago. People show their true nature when money's on the table. That's why you protect what matters and never apologize for it. He'd been right, and now I understood exactly what he'd meant. The trust was secure. The business was thriving. My children knew who they were and what they stood for. And me? I was free. Free from lies, from manipulation, from a woman who'd never really known me at all. I'd spent 33 years in a marriage built on illusion. Now I had the rest of my life to live in truth. And that was the greatest inheritance of all.